Hello and welcome to Getting Started with OnCommand Insight. Today's session will go over reporting, and it'll be an introduction to our data warehouse. My name is Bourque. I'm the OnCommand Insight Technical Marketing Engineer for the OnCommand Insight product suite. And today I'm joined by Mr. Ketsia, one of our OnCommand Insight strategy and architecture specialists when it comes to reporting.
Hey, everyone.
All right, so Ketsia, why don't we go over a little bit what we have scheduled for this particular vignette?
Sure. So we're going to be starting with the architecture of the data warehouse. We're going to also talk about how to access the portal. Where do you go from the operational client to the data warehouse or to the reporting portal? And then we're going to be talking about how the data marts are set up. How do you access the data that you want to consume so that you can present it back to management? And then accessing the actual reporting portal where you can actually build your drag and drop reports or access can reports or even customer reports. And we'll be showing that as well in a live demo briefly.
Excellent, excellent. So we're going to go over how things connect, how do we make it work together, how do we access that data warehouse, do we access it through a browser or whatnot, where do we get help when we need it, right?
Yep, exactly.
And then we'll actually go through and show you some of the reports and things like that we have in the portal, where they sit and where you can get to them. Excellent. So let's move forward. So first would be architecture, right? So how do we do things? And I think it's important to understand you have this portfolio of modules, right? So with OnCommand Insight, we're typically 5 modules. We have the Discover, the Assure, the Plan, Perform, and one of our newest modules, which is our host file or host VM file system utilization packs that we have. I don't think we need to go into this vignette into great detail on the different modules because they are essentially what we have laid out here in front of you. Discover, exactly that. This is our base module. We need to go out there and discover those assets, right? We need to communicate and bring that information in. So that's a base module. We need it. Then you have your Assure, and that's your risk, your service policies, your end-to-end service quality, mapping all of those things together, watching them, and then alerting you against any violations to those defined policies. Perform, that's exactly what it is, right? So it's performance, right? Collecting all those ones and zeros, that throughput, those IOPS, that latency against all of those logical and physical constructs of the environment. And then lastly, Plan, which we're planning on focusing on today and getting you some understanding of what does that Plan module have to offer.
One thing to note, though, that the Perform module is required if you need to report on performance-related use cases.
Absolutely, absolutely. So good point, Ketsia. So when it comes to deployment and architecture, it helps to understand how does the information get to my data warehouse, right? And to do that, I think you need a little bit of basics around the foundation. Where's this data coming from, right? So typically, with an OCI environment, let's say this is an average, right? We have some big customers. We have some very small customers as well. What it would start off with is either a virtual or physical appliance, right? And we load our OCI software onto that, or OnCommand Insight software for you folks who are new to us. You download an MSI file, right? It's just a simple installer file. You locate it on a physical or virtual box and install it. It takes a matter of minutes. Once it's configured, or installed, we start to configure our devices. We start talking to the NetApp arrays, the EMC arrays, the Hitachi, the IBM, so on and so forth. We bring all that information in, and maybe, in your case, you're a very large environment. You have globally dispersed data centers, maybe one in Singapore, maybe one in Texas. We have a number of different ways to communicate to that. Maybe we can communicate to it from one box, but maybe you have some latency there, or maybe you have a DMZ zone in that area. You don't want to open up all the ports, we can simply put another appliance there. All of that information is collected from the multiple units, or maybe just one, and then sent back to a single data warehouse, right? All that information gets federated into a single repository. I think you'll talk about this in more detail, but we have some intelligence there, making sure that you're not double counting capacities, things like that. And then once that data is in that data warehouse, and there's a process called ETL that we do, we take all this information, we carve it up into buckets, these different buckets, dimensions, or data marts that you'll talk about.
Yep, so we're going to be modeling these into particular assets. So, for example, we're going to look at any capacity-related things will be under the capacity schema. Anything that's related to performance will be under performance schema. And then anything that's in between is going to be either in port or inventory.
Exactly. So, and then when we get to that data, right, we have a number of different tools that you'll talk about, so we can create our own reports or use the out-of-the-box reports, and that's where we get this last stage here where we have the report creation, right? So maybe, Ketsia, I'll give you a moment to talk a little bit about, the underlying hood. It's a little bit more detailed than what I just showed you on the first slide, but maybe you can talk to this a bit.
Yep, sure. So for the OnCommand Insight operational server, we have both the Cassandra side and we have the MySQL database. The data warehouse is talking to the SandScreen servers or OnCommand Insight servers, MySQL database. It's basically doing a pull for the information. So all your individual assets here, such as your NetApp, EMC, Hitachi, IBM, and so forth, we're pulling out information from the Insight server to the data warehouse. And then you'll see here we have both the Cassandra and MySQL. The Cassandra, of course, is pulling all the samples. It's then aggregating this into a summary for our MySQL database.
When you say samples, you're referring to directly performance samples, right?
Exactly. So all the inventory information will be already automatically pulled into the MySQL database. The performance side is going to be collectively put into MySQL via aggregating that to a average or looking at the peaks and then putting that into MySQL so that's pulled to the data warehouse. You'll see that we can also access this multiple ways. We can access this via mobile, we can access this via the Java UI, or we can also access this via REST or our web UI interface.
So one thing that we see with Cassandra is it gives us the ability to scale to mass amounts of data, right? So big data, it gives us that performance, that reaction. So being able to, we're not sitting there watching the hourglass as we try to generate reports or bring up that data inside our web clients, right? So it gives us that performance that we're looking for with a huge amount of data behind it. The MySQL, we've had that, in the previous versions, and, it's still very robust, but, this Cassandra database with the MySQL mixture that we have today really allows us to grow and scale our product.
Yep, exactly. So the next piece would be here, the data warehouse server. We'll have both the HTML5 interface. We'll also have the backend SQL so that if you want to build your own reports, you don't have to necessarily access our autonomous reporting portal. You can actually just point a SQL editor to our backend database, start writing your SQL queries if you wanted to, and then integrate that with some other CMDB if you wanted to.
So our database is extensible, right? It's wide open.
Exactly.
We don't hold their data hostage. We have it there. If they want to tie in with their own SQL toolkit, they can do so.
Yep,
right?
exactly. So our documentation fully documents all our schemas. So anything within our tables will be there for you.
So maybe I'll move back just a little bit. If you could talk a little bit about the ETL process. Why do we do this? How often does that data get flown up into the data warehouse?
Yep, sure, exactly. So this is going to be typically scheduled once per day. The reason being is because we could potentially have multiple servers on different regions or different countries talking to the same data warehouse server. So we're going to try and extract this to the data warehouse, massage it so that we are looking at the same time intervals. So you could have different time ranges. If you have a server in Australia or Sydney and looking at a server that's in Boston, you want to correlate the times at the same point in time. This is typically around performance where we want to get this information correct. So we're basically transforming this and loading into those typical tables or data marts so that we can actually do our capacity planning or forecasting.
Yeah, now I think we take this a step further and say there is no standardization amongst the heterogeneous storage platforms out there, right? Everybody calls something different. So we do some level of normalization and I would say using some of these more generic terms so they fit across all the different storage vendor types, right? And that all happens in this ETL process.
We could also be taking a look at if you were to analyze the same device in different servers, we want to make sure that we don't double count. You could have the same host looking at different arrays in different servers, and we want to make sure that we are doing this correctly. So during the transformation process, we're going to make sure that we only count your VMAX if you only have one once rather than twice if you have them monitored in both those servers. If you have an annotation that we'll talk about later on in a different episode on a particular device but not another, we want to make sure that we are capturing the right annotation correctly as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, because when you're doing this manually in an Excel spreadsheet, it runs the real risk of double counting capacity, right? Not understanding that you've already got the same host in there, right? And you don't want to wind up thinking you have more storage on the floor than you actually do. So great point there. So, one thing that we should talk about is a little bit is the historical data retention. How long do we keep this data, for what timestamps, get an understanding of how much data we have, not only in the client, but in the data warehouse. Where do we store that? Maybe, Ketsia, you can elaborate a bit on that.
Sure. So for the operational side, when we're looking at the performance side, by default, we'll be looking at to the last 7 days. So for our performance troubleshooting, that's where we're going to be taking a look at, right? It's going to go down to the actual minute samples that we actually collect for the operational client. But then when we're going to the data warehouse, we're going to consolidate these to either hourly points or daily points. As you can see here, looking at the performance data mart, the first two columns here, first two rows, this is looking at both the volumes and internal volumes, what we call LUNs and flex vols, down to the hourly and daily samples. So when we're consolidating to hourly and daily points, we're looking at 14 days and 13 months respectively. So when it goes beyond 14 days, by default, it's going to drop off, similar to what happens in the operational client. Now, for the capacity side, it works a little differently. We are collecting only daily, so the last sample time that we get from your inventory side of your operational client, that's what you're going to see for those daily points. It's going to be then pushed every 13 months, and then after 13 months, it's going to roll up to a monthly point so they can retain your monthly trending so you can start doing real forecasting accurately. And then for the inventory data mart, you're actually going to be taking a look at point in time only. This is basically our MySQL dump database, right? So dumping everything into these tables so that you can take a look at all your individual assets, whether that's your host, switch, or servers, and consolidating that into a point in time so they can capture accurate data at that last polling interval for ETL.
So, if I were to summarize this, we have 7 days of performance in the actual web client today, so that operational client. That data every day flows up into the data warehouse where we hold summarized either daily, hourly, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or even yearly data points there, but they're roll-ups of that data that we've contained, that near real-time data that we've had in the operational client. Inventory, always point in time, right? So the most current that we show in there, and the performance would actually, as I mentioned, have those roll-ups. Is that a decent summary?
Exactly, yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So accessing the data warehouse. So, how do we get into that, Ket? How do we actually log into this, right? We've used the actual operation client. We know we can access it from our web browser. Is the data warehouse any different?
Exactly. So it's basically going to just point to your web browser using the host name or FQDN or short name if you have that as well, /WH. That's going to bring you directly to the data warehouse portal. You'll see the login screen as you see here. You're going to log in very similar to how you did for the optional client. So you can be admin123 for the password.
Okay. And so I also know that inside of the operational client, I see some icons there. They look like little graphs on the top of the screen. That actually gets me right into the data warehouse reporting side too, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a difference between the reporting portal and the data warehouse side? What can you explain some of the difference? Why would I want to log into /reporting versus /DWH?
So for the data warehouse or /WH, this is looking at the configuration side for your data warehouse server. So if you were to figure out how you want to schedule your ETL or configure connectors so that you're pointing all your servers to the data warehouse, or try to configure LDAP so that you are accessing this via your SSO, or if you wanted to set up user accounts so that they have access to certain privileges, this is where you want to go to /WH. If you want to access the reporting portal to actually build your drag and drop reports or view reports or schedule reports, then you want to do /reporting.
All right, so just a /DWH, when we put that in front of the URL for our data warehouse, that is our administration for that actual box, essentially, right? Where you get to set it up, you kind of set it up once, kind of forget about it kind of thing. and then everything else, therefore, moving forward, you're usually working on the / reporting side.
Exactly.
Okay. Perfect. So that moves us on to user management and who has access to what can they do with that access, what kind of securities are in place for those actual permissions. We're looking at LDAP here. You mentioned that, we can use SSO. It has Active Directory tie-ins there. And we have a number of different user or I'd say account types, whether it be guest, user, admin, or OAdmin. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, what types of capabilities, especially on the report authoring side, do you get with each one of these account types?
Sure. So if we're taking a look at the admin, it's pretty straightforward. But when we're looking at the reporting roles, if we're looking at the pro author, this is the person who gets access to our actual reporting tools that are a little bit more complex to use, but are a lot more customizable, if you will. So this is going to give you access to both Workspace Advanced and Report Studio. These are two primary reporting tools that we actually use. This author does get access to Workspace Advanced, but they will never get access to Report Studio. Business consumers are going to be able to view and schedule the reports. So if they want to take a copy of the report that was already created, they can take a view at it, run it as, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF. They do have that option. And then recipients are people who get reports via email.
Okay. All right. So, one thing, it always helped me when I was first seeing this is, the difference between Workspace Advanced and Report Studio. And with Workspace Advanced, a great authoring tool, it's pretty simple. It's what you see is what you get, drag and drop capabilities. Very simple for someone myself with very little coding experience to be able to start creating their own reports. The big brother to that, which is where I think you spend most of your time, if not manually doing the coding yourself because you're that good, is the Report Studio, right? That allows you to do those more complex SQL joins and merges and actually do a little bit more fine-tuning of joining those different data mounts or dimensions together, right?
Yep, so to add to that, Workspace Advanced, or what used to be called Business Side Advanced, does only take a look at one data mart at one point in time. If you want to join multiple data marts, that does require Report Studio.
Right, so if I wanted to join inventory with, say, performance information, I would need to use the Report Studio side. That's a little bit more powerful. But if I want to create inventory reports and I'm only going to stay in inventory, then Workspace Advanced would be fine for me.
Exactly.
Yep, okay. So, how do we access the report portal? I know we've talked about it a little bit, but maybe you can just go through the details so we get these out.
Sure, so you can actually access the reporting portal itself via the little chart button from your official client. You can also access this from the /WH as well. Either way, it's going to bring you to a reporting portal, as long as your DNS, of course, is configured correctly. You'll see some cases where this is going to be an issue, but we can definitely work around it. Once you click on this, it's going to bring you back to another login screen. You can log in via the same credentials that you have for your data warehouse. And then once you log in, you'll start to see our stored in the dashboard as well as our public folders where you'll see all the folder structures for our reports.
So you have indicated on this slide here, that little red square at the bottom, that's that graph icon we were talking about, being able to click into the Report Studio. And as we mentioned before, you could actually skip past this and just type /reporting at the end, right? Our URLs are distinct and actually launch you into not only the objects, but other areas of the product like reporting or the data warehouse.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So I think we're at the section here now, Ketsia, where we can do some live demonstration, walk people through the actual tool. I know that's what they've all been wanting to see. I'm going to turn over control to you, and hopefully we can get you to share up your desktop.
All right, let me just take it from you. And let me share my screen here.
All right, and I can see your screen now.
All right, so I am pointing my Firefox to my actual data warehouse here. I'm just going to log in here. And the first thing we see is the jobs because I've already had my connection already in place. But let's take a look at the connector screen here. So this connector screen is where we're going to configure our actual connectors. So our optional clients go into the data warehouse.
So let's make sure we understand this portion here. If we have multiple servers, right, in many cases we only have one, but if we do have an environment that's very large and requires multiple servers, This is where you connect those multiple servers to this single repository, this single data warehouse.
Exactly.
All right, so you were simply just putting an IP in there and letting it go, right?
Yep, so you can use an IP, FQDN, and then you'll save the inventory and password here as you're using your password.
And we've already provided that for you in the tool, so
Exactly.
that's something that you need to configure.
Exactly. Now I'm going to go next to the schedule button here. This is where we schedule our ETL process. So by default right now we have this at 3 a.m., but I believe the default is at 7 p.m. You can click on the edit schedule here to change this to anything that you want. So whenever is least impacting to your business, you may want to put that as your ETL schedule.
Again, we want to do this just once a day, right? That's our recommended best practice. Yep.
So then we're going to go into looking at the actual documentation. So if you need a little help button here, I'm going to click on documentation. And this is where we document our schema as well as our diagrams. So clicking on any of these diagrams here will pull up an ER diagram or any relationship diagram showing you how we map our tables from the MySQL database to actual drag and drop features. So looking at the storage pool capacity facts here, we are able to show our technical keys or what we call IDs for here, and then mapping these so that we can actually build our drag and drop, as well as showing you that you can join these manually if you wanted to use SQL as well. Now I'm just going to go back here and talk about the actual structure here. Everything is well documented. Everything that's under performance will be under the performance data mart. So we have the array level, so that's the internal volume or volume. And looking at the switch in VM. We also have up here the inventory side that looks at the storage, the fabric, the VMs, host, and so forth. And then all these others are our capacity data marts. One thing to note here is that when you do purchase only plan, you only have access to numbers 1 through 9. So you will not have access to the performance side.
So this is those performance or those data marts that we were talking about during the ETL process. When that information comes up, we basically resort it. We normalize some of the data under different terms. We carve it up into these buckets, and we put them here, right?
Exactly.
So when we were talking about Workspace Advanced and saying I couldn't join inventory to, say, performance and so on and so forth, you now can see these numbers 1 through 10 of how we carve those up into different buckets. Those are essentially our buckets of data.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to click on reporting help here to give a little bit more context around our actual use cases that fall under each bucket of our data mart. We can take a look at the search function here, and let's say we want to understand how chargeback works. We can search for chargeback. It'll pop up with the chargeback data model. Clicking on that, you'll then see what answers you are what questions you are answering with the chargeback data mart.
Yep, so my use cases, right?
Mm-hmm. So while we're waiting for this to load up, we can also take a look at other data marts here under the reporting data model. Clicking on here, we can then take a look at the overall structure. So maybe we want to learn a little bit more of performance data models, how this is working, and we can also see samples of reports here, which I'll show later on as well. So going back to here, we can now start to go back to our reporting portal.
So that's clicking on that graph again as we're launching into. Now we're going to find where we have those canned reports that ship with the product, the report authoring tools that we have that come with the product, as well as some of the dashboards that are already laid out for them.
So for our legacy customers, this is taking a look at the Cognos interface. We've modified it since 7.0 for our legacy users, but this is essentially a certain dashboard. Clicking on the public folders here, this is our new folder structure. Barring a couple of some of these folders here, we do have access to the customer reports, packages, reports, and tutorials, as well as vendor-specific reports. So under the packages here, if you remember historically, we did have these separated into multiple locations. So it was very hard for our existing customers to navigate to a specific data mart. They couldn't tell which package they had to click on because they couldn't tell what was really there. Now we decided to change this in 7.1 so that you can easily find what packages are available in the data warehouse.
So if I had to summarize, some of the changes that we made over the years has been in usability, right? So making it very simple and easier for people to be able to navigate around in the data warehouse and find the data that they're looking for. So we have this new storage manager dashboard, really meant for business analysts, storage architects, the CIOs, the CTOs of the business, getting that high-level view. And then what we've also done is taken those packages, those data marts, restructuring those so they're very clear, very easy to find. And then we also took the actual canned or out-of-the-box reports and cleaned those up as well, right? I think we have a complement of like 27 or so newly redesigned and refreshed reports in there, right?
Exactly.
So a lot of people will get some benefit out of there. If you haven't seen the reports in a while, you're maybe one of our, our legacy customers, if you will, or one of our long-term customers. Definitely take a look at some of the changes in the reporting there if you haven't looked at it. I know a lot of people have their own reports made or they made their own, but it warrants the end user to go back and take a look at some of the changes that you've done. And I know you've had a big part of creating some of those reports.
Exactly. Now, we can also take a look at the tutorials here, which I mentioned earlier, to show how you can actually build your own drag-and-drop reports. By clicking on here, you can then take a look at certain examples, if you will, and they also have videos that are allowed for you to take a look at. And then also a step-by-step guide of how to build these reports.
So essentially a how-to walkthrough on creating a handful of reports on your own. So we're essentially providing a video to other videos here that help the end user create their own videos.
Exactly.
Or their own reports, sorry.
Exactly.
Excellent.
So I think that's all I really will show for the reporting portal. Let's now take a look at the schedule here. So we can also take a look at if you were to configure a report that you did like, such as, let's say, the OCR scorecard, and you want to have this scheduled off in, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet to your manager. We do have the option to set this either daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. We can put this on, let's say, at Thursday at 1:39 p.m.
So for I change what formats here to send those reports?
Exactly. So by clicking the override the default values here, by default it's going to be HTML format, but we can change it to do, let's say, a PDF, or we can have both. And then by checking on send a link to report by email, I'm going to click on edit the options. And this is where I can configure my email.
I see. So what about I know particularly my inbox gets flooded with various reports and things that people are sending me. Is there a way to send this to a file share or SharePoint location?
Yep,
or
exactly. So we can definitely do that by doing here. So let's say you want to save this as report view. Click on the edit options here.
Yep.
And you can start to look at
different locations to send this to, right? So
exactly.
I've seen it before where you've sent me reports where I'm sent an actual URL, a distinct URL, where I had to log in to run that report, right? You didn't send me anything at all. There was nothing attached. How would I accomplish that? Do I just simply uncheck the HTML format and it sends me a link, or how would you get that URL to be sent to me?
So if you wanted to go to edit, you can actually have the include a link to report.
And then I see attach the report. So that would be actually sending me the report, but if I had that deselected, I just get a link. Now I have to log in with my credentials. It's a little bit more secure, right? So I have to have access to this and just can't get the report, willy-nilly, so to speak.
Exactly.
Excellent. Makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
All right, so, I think this is a good first step here, in walking through some of, where the information sits. I think, we'll move forward in other videos and walk people through, how to use Workspace Advanced, how to use Report Studio, walk them through some examples on maybe even setting up some of their own reports for scheduling. I know this product saves me hours and hours and hours of having to manually massage this data. I schedule the report that I created once, and it goes out every single week, every day, every Monday, first of the month, whatever. And I still tell everybody it takes me 6 hours to generate these reports, but in reality, the product is already doing it for me with the data that gets sent every day. So we'll move into other videos, and I hope you enjoyed this, this brief overview of getting started with OnCommand Insight's data warehouse, and look forward to seeing you on other episodes of these vignettes. And thank you again for your interest in OnCommand Insight in the data warehouse. And Ketsia, thank you for your participation today.
No problem.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.